Welcome to Figure Eight, where we feature inspiring stories of women entrepreneurs who have grown their businesses to 7 and 8 figures revenue. If you're in the mix of growing a bigger business, these stories are for you. Join us as we explore where the tough spots are, how to overcome them, and how to prepare yourself for the next portion of the climb. I'm your host, Julie Ellis. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and a growth and leadership coach who co-founded, grew, and exited an 8-figure business. This led me to exploring why some women achieve great things. And that led to my book, Big Gorgeous Goals. Let's explore the systems, processes, and people that help us grow our businesses to new heights. If you're interested in growing your business, this podcast will help. Now, let's get going. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Figure Eight. Today, I am chatting with Jess Schultz. And Jess is right now the founder and CEO of Amplify Group. But like any good entrepreneur, she has a pretty eclectic story of the path she took to get there. She's a great team builder of people, of companies, of pipelines. And she started her career in capital markets and moved to Saas Sales and then venture capital. And now she herself is a founder and operator. And I think what she's doing is really exciting. So I'm very happy to welcome you today, Jess. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I think your path is, I always love the eclectic path because I feel like mine has been, kind of in different spaces than you, but that same level of, you pivot and go somewhere else and just keep moving up in your career. What can you tell me about how you got started and how you ended where you are?
Sure. I started as a finance major in college because I was good at math and my parents were CPAs. And so that just seemed like a natural thing to do. We didn't get much career counseling. I don't know if that's changed. I hope it has. After I graduated, I went into finance at a bank. Just because I didn't know, honestly, I just wasn't aware of all the opportunities really within finance. So bank was just kind of a natural thing. I was fortunate enough to get my first job at Deutsche Bank in London, which is an amazing experience. And then after that, I worked for Merrill Lynch for many years in both Chicago and New York. I was always in the capital markets sector of the bank, so more of like the institutional side, not the retail side. Enjoyed it, learned a ton, but candidly, it was just not um, lighting me up, maybe is one way to say it. Very high stress, very misogynistic, very highly regulated. And so I was looking for something different. But I had almost at that point like 8 or 9 years of experience in that sector. So my thought was, everything's moving electronic and software and SaaS was like almost like a new term at that point. So I went and worked at a trading software company where I was selling software to the same cast of characters, same that I worked with at the bank, but it was a software company versus a bank. So it was a very different corporate culture, which was nice. Um, Learned a ton about technology there because trading software is highly technical. And but then I always kind of had my eye on like getting out of the trading world altogether. So once I had some experience in software sales, then I transitioned to a company called Trinet. And that was a pretty big pivot because it was selling HR services and software to startups and small businesses. So really different than anything I'd done up to that point, but I was excited about the opportunity. One, it's just like a need to have product, which as a salesperson, I love selling something that you need to have versus a nice to have. And I really believed in the value prop and the value that they were providing startups and SMBs. And then it was also an opportunity to work with venture capital and private equity. So they had Trinet had had a lot of success with that as a go-to-market strategy on the coasts, and they wanted someone to build that out in the Midwest. So I joined and got exposure to that world, which I fell in love with. I just loved like um, the optimism and the ambition that startups have at those early stages, and like working with those investors was really fun. Um, so I did that for about 3 years. And then one of the VCs that I worked with quite frequently was like, oh, we're actually looking to expand our team. Would you want to come work here? And that wasn't a career path I'd ever envisioned, honestly, for myself. But I was like, what do you want with me? I'm like a derivatives girl turned salesperson. I don't have the traditional like iBanking or M&A background. And they were like, no, actually, like we love your background. We think venture capital is 90% sales in many ways. And once I joined, I agreed with them. It is a lot of sales motions, similar sales motions. Um, so joined the firm, worked there for about a year. It was a great experience, but I just I missed being more, I guess, more of an operator. Like when you're an investor, there's only so much influence and involvement that you're going to have, especially as a minority investor where you don't have a huge ownership stake. And so I really missed being intimately involved with businesses. And I realized in my time there that a lot of the founders that I was working with in our portfolio had the same go-to-market challenges, and I didn't feel like there was many really great solutions for them in the market. And so I created Amplify 3 years ago to basically serve those needs that I didn't feel like were being met. So that's what I do now.
Yeah. And it's such a journey from like big, big corporate to working with entrepreneurs, especially in the stage you're working with them at where they're in that go to market, up to series A kind of phase, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's a little volatile and a little crazy, but I like it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too because I mean, obviously you kind of grew up your career in pretty male dominated industries. And do you see diversity now with the kinds of entrepreneurs that you're working with? Are you able to create sort of that, kind of environment that you want?
Yeah, I mean that's one nice thing I guess about owning your own business is you get to write the rules to some degree. And a another woman that I met with like early on in starting my company, I met with several other people that do similar work to me, just to try to get peer-to-peer feedback on how to structure things, etc. But something she said to me I'll never forget. She was like, I have a no asshole policy. If I don't work with assholes, if they're an asshole they got to go. And I was like, I'm going to institute that right away. So similarly, I'm thankful that I haven't had to quote unquote fire many clients. I've been grateful to work with a lot of really wonderful people, men and women. But I do have a no asshole policy, and thankfully I do get to work. I feel like every founder that I do support is very progressive and very respectful, and I'm been grateful to work with a lot of female founders. That's been awesome.
Well, that's good. So what would when a founder comes to you, just tell me kind of what that path and journey looks like in terms of how you work together and what you do for them.
Yeah, so 9 times out of 10, I start them out with what I call a go-to-market audit. And I'm a firm believer that when you're having like growth challenges or you have growth goals, there's no silver bullet. There's no like, oh, it's just this one thing. If we do this one thing, everything it's going to rain cash. Usually it's a more complex Rubik's Cube to put together to really like take the company to the next level. So I'm saying I have is, I hope a doctor wouldn't give you a prescription without an exam. I similarly don't want to come in and prescribe things until I really, have an educated understanding of where your business is today, where you want to go. So we spend 30 days doing that go to market audit, which is a deep dive of like, what is their product, who's their target customer, who are their customers today, how did they get them. I do a lot of competitive analysis on like other competitors they have in the space. Oftentimes I interview their customers to get more color. So it's really like a holistic process that I go through to come up with, okay, based on everything I learned and observed and what I know you told me about your goals, here's what I think we need to do in the next 30, 60, 90 days to get you where you want to go. And then we move into like execution mode. So the audit itself is like a 30-day process, and then the execution really varies business to business, but most businesses work with me 6 to 12 months to get them to the point of maturity that they don't need me around like full time anymore. Well, I'm not full time, but they don't need me as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they've been able to, get to a point of traction where they can hire people in
Correct.
house to do those kinds of jobs, and kind of it's, moving along that scale of, or that continuum of scaling up.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting space to work in because, well, as you said earlier, there are not a lot of people slash nobody really kind of doing exactly where you're playing in the space. Nobody's really doing it.
There are a couple other people. No one else does it quite the same way I do. I mean, and I guess that's true of everyone, right? I think what you mostly see out there is like there are people that do, they might call themselves a fractional CRO, but I think they're really more like a fractional VP of sales, meaning they come in and act as like a sales coach and mentor and just help with the sales process. And then there's fractional CMOs or fractional marketing folks that will help you with content or digital marketing activities. I'm a little unique in that I do both, like the sales coach and strategy plus the marketing, just because I feel like it's so important to do both at that early stage. And usually my target customer can't afford to have two of me. Um, so yeah.
Well, I think that's the real, as you hit the seven figures, it's the real problem of you need all the people, you need the whole team, but you cannot afford the whole team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so how do you like it feels like it makes sense that those 2 come together and, maybe when the company's bigger, they break back out, but
Yep.
it feels like it makes a lot of sense for, you to think about them in a holistic way.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And
They're
so
very important.
now, as much as you are doing this work helping other entrepreneurs grow their businesses, you're also in the process of growing your own business at the same time, which is super interesting. And what has that journey been like for you?
A journey, as you know, as a
It always
business owner
is.
yourself. But I think, someone once called it to me like life tuition, and I think it's kind of like entrepreneur tuition. Like you have to pay your tuition. You're gonna do some things right, you're gonna do some things wrong, and you live, you learn, you pivot. I think for me, scaling what I do has been very challenging, like scaling myself, um, because exactly what you just mentioned, like I'm a bootstrapped business. So in a perfect world, if I were to, if I had the money, I would hire a copywriter and a designer and a SDR, right? I would have like a whole team of people that have like functional disciplines, but that's not really financially feasible to bite off like that payroll all at once. And then, so for me, I tried to hire people that were more, um, even though I kind of hate the term, like Swiss Army knives, like people that had more than one skill set that could kind of like bob and weave into client engagements like I do. But it's really hard to find those people, to be honest. And it's not that they don't exist, but sometimes they exist and they have salary demands that would make it challenging for the margins and the math to just make sense. um, so I think like just staffing and figuring out how to staff and scale what I do into an agency, I haven't figured that out. Um, so I did try and I scaled back down to being a solopreneur in 2024 just for my own sanity and bank account. Um, but I do still personally believe that there's way more demand for what I'm doing than there is supply. And I think it's such a win-win for me or any other consultant and for the customer, especially for the startup market. They don't need me or someone like me full time. And for me, I love like the variety of working on multiple businesses at the same time. I think a lot of people that maybe have a similar personality to me would too. You get kind of bored if you're just selling the same thing for 3 years straight. But there's a lot of fun and in getting to switch and work on different businesses. And so like it's really rewarding and it's great money. Like I mean, I candidly I do make better money doing what I do now than I did like full time at an organization. So I think like anyway, it's a really good win-win for both sides. So I would like to find ways to help more people become me or like do what I do, so to speak. Um, so I'm trying to figure out how I do that. And my first attempt this year, it's brand new, is to start off offering coaching, like one-on-one coaching for people that either already are a fractional go-to-market leader or want to become a fractional go-to-market leader. And I'm hoping through those like one-on-one engagements, I'll really intimately learn like what people need to get to level up themselves and to really like build their own business. So I hope to be, and then I hope to somehow maybe turn that into like a digital course or a community. I don't know what that becomes as a phase two, but something that is more, I guess, approachable to the masses. Um, in particular with the employment environment that we're seeing. There's a lot of really good people out there that have lost their jobs at big companies. And so I think like if I can activate more of them to like fill a role like this. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I'm trying to solve the problem of like how do I scale myself and how do we scale people to do what I'm doing for more companies because I think it's really a need.
Yeah. And I would agree with that, like finding the right product market fit, how you go to market, what's happening all around that time as you sort of start to get sales, build sales, and get feedback from those early customers so that you can get to those, out of your seed round and up to Series A, like all of that happening relatively quickly is important. And having a structured process, I think probably helps entrepreneurs a lot.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, just because I mean they're trying to do everything, right? They're trying to and the CEO is always the first salesperson. I mean,
Yep.
that's they're the one who had the dream, the vision and imagined it. And so they are the best salesperson for a period of time, but often, a- no one has all the skills they need to do all the roles that they are currently trying to fill.
Yep. And I think there's a lot of noise out there, candidly. Like there's a lot of go-to-market advice. And so I think for founders sometimes too, it's like hard to know what to listen to, like how to like break through the noise and I think sometimes they get taken advantage of as well. Like companies come in and try to sell them like 10K a month PR retainers. And it's like that's just totally unnecessary sometimes for like the stage of their company or whatever. Um, so I think I hope to educate more people, and that's what I try to do through my content, etc. Is like, here's what you really need to know for this stage. Like, here's what really matters, and here's why, um, and here's what you should be spending on it. And anything else is just like predatory, like, and not necessary. And like, it just doesn't have to be as complicated as some people like to make it seem.
Yeah. Well, and it's so easy to see an entrepreneur who is so blessed with advisors, but they have so much advice coming at them that they
Yeah.
don't know actually what's right for them, what to believe, what to follow and take up and what to shed. And I do a lot of talking to people about like who are the like three or four cornerstone advisors that you are really pulling in and taking keeping close,
Hmm.
because you can't, like, it just becomes so noisy and you can see the freezing up that happens, right? And the
Yep.
inability to move forward.
The analysis paralysis, yes.
Yeah. And
Yep.
especially, yeah, you see it at a table and it's like conflicting advice coming from every single person. And you're like, how do you decide? Because it is hard to decide. And there probably are multiple paths. How do you know which is the best one?
Hmm.
So, and it's where your background, I think, brings an interesting, like, this sort of rigorousness and discipline that you can bring from like your capital markets background and that sort of thing. And then the sales piece and how you can bring those together to help them really figure out how they're going to get off the ground and start to fly.
Yep. No, completely agreed. I'm very process oriented, and I think that's a requirement. Like another little saying I say often, which is like, clarity is how you begin, but consistency is how you win. And so it's like about creating the right processes that are repeatable and scalable. And then it's just running that play over and over and over again. And it's, I think too many times startups, well, they don't know where to begin because there's a lot of analysis paralysis, or then they start and stop things a lot and there's not a lot of consistency or commitment. And so then they don't ever really see anything work. And it's like, well, yeah, because that nothing will work after 1 week or 1 month, in general. You got to give it a little more time.
And that can be so hard as an entrepreneur because you started out in the beginning where you were like decision, 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 go here, go here, go here. Oh, let's pivot. Oh, let's pivot. And it didn't matter. You were getting the little traction in the small
Yeah,
state you were in, and make crossing that bridge, right? Of like, oh, I can't just decide to turn right tomorrow. I have to, really think about it and make sure it's the right thing. And how long is it going to take if we do turn right? And like every decision has that many more implications as you get a team around you and you start getting the traction.
totally.
Sometimes that
And
feels boring to people too, right?
yeah. And I think the thing at least from what I've observed, I think the reason why they pivot a lot is because they don't know how long something should take, just in general, and they don't know what good looks like. So they don't really know, like, simple things, right? Like, is this open rate on my email good? I don't know. So I don't know. Does the email suck? Is it my subject line? Like they don't. So that's where I try to educate. Like I focus a lot on that is like educating, like, okay, if for example, you want to pursue SEO as a strategy, that's a long term strategy. We have to have at minimum a 4 to 6 month commitment. And this is how we're going to know it's working. These are the metrics we're going to see as leading indicators that it makes sense to continue to invest. And this is how we're going to these are the metrics we're going to look for to know if it's even worth investing in for your business. And so like I think it's just educating them on there is some data that it exists and that we can use to help them feel more confident about making the commitment and sticking to the commitment.
Yeah. And then and then how do they build their own data to track their progress once they get started?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it is the piece of like, in a world where we have endless data, it's amazing how hard it is to find the right pieces and the right information to kind of hone in that are useful, instead of like just part of a big ocean.
Yep. No, it's so true. We're like inundated with too much data sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, therefore, picking out the parts that we need feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I often think about like we talked about this in our own business. We had an unlimited amount of data at our hands and we, would often sort of like lament that we weren't using it all. But
Hmm.
but I sort of have that feeling of like but if we're pulling it for the sake of, like it's garbage in and garbage out. Like yes, we have it. We need to use these pieces. We need to figure out what pieces of it are most useful for us at any given point in time.
Hmm. Totally agree. And I had something you'll probably resonate with, but my fractional CFO, because I hired one of those, because I was like, even though I know finance, I've never run a business finance. And so I'm like, I need to learn that skill set. And he said something so important to me. I remember I was trying to track something related to client margins, and he's like, okay, Jessica, he's like, I'm going to ask you a question that I want you to ask yourself whenever you're having one of these moments. And I was like, all right. And he's like, are you going to do anything once you have that information? And I was like, no. For that moment anyway, he's like, are you actually going to do anything different? And at least at that point in my business, even if I had the data I was seeking, there wasn't much I could do with my current team size and whatever. Like, so it was such a good realization moment where I was like, am I going to do anything if I have it? No. Okay. Then I don't really need
Right.
it.
And then you can sort of think, okay, and if I ever do need it, I know we can get it. And then,
Right.
so right now, because it's also that like you could have them pull it or,
Hmm.
like sort through it or whatever would need to happen to give you something served up to you that was useful. But it's a waste of money and time to have them do it for
Yeah.
the sake of throwing it in the garbage, essentially.
Yeah. So sometimes I think we all get fixated on like, I need to know this answer, but it's like, do I?
Yeah. What do I really need to know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where like having that process of like how you go in, you gather information, and then, you've got to at some point lift back up. You've got to go to work, but you've got to have a process where you lift back up and like do the check because
Right.
things don't stay the same.
Agreed. Especially in the sales and marketing world, I feel like, well, at least that's the world I live in. So I know sure it's probably true for a lot of other disciplines too, though, but things are changing all the time.
Yeah, they really are. And yeah, you think of, I mean, and now with AI and all of the other business tools that are, that's revolutionizing a lot of parts of what we all do.
Yep. I'm a big like, I mean, now you brought up AI, but I'm a big believer though you should only use AI, in my opinion, to automate or to do something if you already know how to do it. Like, like you actually know how to do it. And I feel like the thing that people fall victim to is like they don't know how to write a good cold email, period. And then they just use AI to write a cold email. And I'm like, well, if you don't even know what good looks like, you can't even check AI. So then what so that's, I don't know, that's my own rule of thumb with AI is I'm like, I only use it if it's something that I actually know how to do because then I can at least validate that the results are what I would expect or
Yeah. I think that's a really great point about it because it's true that yeah, again, it's the if you don't know what garbage looks like, you can't
yeah.
determine if it's going to help you. Like even though you feel like it saved you a lot of time, it still might not be worth it.
Right.
Mhm. So, I think it's a tool and yes, yeah, it's inevitable to use it, but I think it's a really great point about being able to assess what you get from it and whether it's what you really want.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some of the young people I think might not get as far as they think because they're just going to use AI to do stuff they don't really know. But my two
Yeah.
cents.
And so who is it that you want to work with? What's the profile? I mean, we talked about kind of size of where that business is and where they're headed,
Mhm.
but what kinds of businesses? What are the verticals that you look at when you think about working with some of these entrepreneurs?
Yeah, for me, like a hard requirement is that it's B2B, like a B2B go-to-market motion. I just don't know enough about consumer, even though I'm fascinated by it. But that's a wholly, totally different growth strategy. So it has to be B2B, has to be software, which is just my own personal thing. There's a lot of challenges with scaling a services business, some of which I alluded to earlier on this call. So I just, anyway, that's just not a challenge I choose to tackle. So B2B software, and then vertically, I worked in capital markets for a long time. So I tend to attract a lot of fintech clients just because I have that core subject matter expertise. And then I also sold benefits in HR, so I know a decent amount about healthcare and benefit and like insurance and benefits. So I've attracted a lot of clients in that space, but I've certainly worked with a handful of B2B businesses within other verticals too. I would say like maybe the other requirement for me is that it's a more complex sale or like a higher ticket item. So if it's like a $99 a month you sign up with your credit card, I'm probably not the best person or I'm not the best person. Like that kind of growth motion, like a product led growth or like that more transactional sale is not my expertise or my passion. I'm more of like the 30K annual contract value to like $1 million. Like, how do we close this really complex sale that has multiple stakeholders involved? So maybe that's more of a requirement than the vertical specific, but
Mhm. Well, and that makes sense, going back to what you said earlier about how you kind of your process is that you really pull everything apart and look at what they're doing and look at where, how, and where the best opportunities are for them to chase, how to go after them, and then you pull it back together. And that makes a lot of sense when you think of that size of a sale.
yeah, because the more transactional stuff is a lot more. like marketing automation, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like that's great. It's just a little, I don't know. They're all hard in their own way, but it's different.
It's the truth. All businesses are hard in their own way. And I think, like, generally speaking, in the entrepreneur community, we feel all very driven. There, you're talking about very driven, successful people. And so it is like hard to understand what you don't know, or that, that like always feeling like you're on a learning curve can feel really hard. And it's the same. I think it's so interesting because when you work with other entrepreneurs, you see it in them, but it's also true for yourself.
Oh, 100%. And another woman I know, she says it's hard to see the label inside the bottle. And I'm sure she got that from somewhere, but I love that saying. And because it's true, like it's easier for me to diagnose problems in someone else's business than it is even in my own. So like I've hired my own host of advisors and consultants to, because I'm like, come give me some objectivity. Like sometimes it's hard for me to see my own label.
It's a great point, and I think it's easy for that to build accountability for you with the people that you bring in to help you, and that then, you can go on your own path of looking at what you need to do to grow and scale. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation with you, and I'm so glad we got introduced.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you won't miss any episodes. Figure 8 isn't just a podcast. It's a way of seeing the big, gorgeous goals of women entrepreneurs coming to life. If you're interested in learning more, you can find my book, Big Gorgeous Goals, on Amazon anywhere you might live. For more about my growth and leadership training programs, visit www.julieellis.ca to see how we might work together. Read my blog or sign up to get your free diagnostic. Are you ready for growth? Once again, that's www.julieellis.ca. When we work together, we all win. See you again soon for another episode of Figure 8.